Hello and welcome to the new episode of Dynamics Update. Today we are going to discuss the release of 10.0.22, which is out in preview right now. And with me, as usual, I have Gustav Sundal. Hello, Gustav.
Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Good evening.
How are you doing today?
Very good, thank you. I'm still catching up on all the new stuff coming in the release waves, and I'm otherwise well. Looking forward to a good podcast looking at version 22 today, right?
Yes, I actually thought that I should start today because I have a backlog item from last time. Last time we discussed the new status, the new feature status called On by Default. And what I didn't realize, because I was a bit sloppy when reading things, was that from 10.0.21, this will be implemented on everything that was released before April. Mm-hmm. So all features that have been released before April, as far as I can understand this, will be enabled. Because what I read is that it said that they had an example which said that a feature that comes in April will be set to on by default in October and will then be made mandatory in April. And that is because they want to force the features to be enabled. Because I think they probably realized that they had they were hoping that everyone would do this by themselves and hope that they would turn them on anyway. What they then realized was that nobody did that whatsoever. So now they actually do the same thing with features as they do with changes in entities and so on. You have a year and then we enable it.
Yeah, exactly. But does that also apply to not the regional features, right? It's just the ones that are applicable for your region. So, I mean, they're all automatically updated. And if you're in that current region, that will be updated, right?
There was no caveat for regional features, actually.
No, but it makes sense. So,
the thing is, I think it makes sense. Because I think that, and now I'm just speculating, I'm just guessing here, but what I think is that Microsoft want as many customers as possible to be on a as full featured system as possible. Mm. And I know that you and I have been reasoning about these regional settings. I mean, you could approach them in one of two ways. Either you can say, we don't use them, so we shouldn't enable them. Or you can reason, we don't use them, so we might as well enable them. Because
of course,
we don't use them anyway. and I think from a testing perspective, it's probably safer, at least if you want to get the same testing results as Microsoft, it's probably safer to have them enabled.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
Microsoft is testing on a fully updated and fully featured system.
Most likely, that is correct. And I think it also makes sense out of a planning perspective, because whenever you do testing, you don't want run 2 weeks of tests and then someone decides to enable it. You need to have that planned all ahead. Like this sprint or this release, we will enable these features automatically so everyone is aware of them. And that also makes it important to kind of try to stay ahead and read up on what is coming instead of just looking at it for each release. So you can plan for it, because if you know it's going to be automatically activated, it makes kind of a more incentive to stay up to date, because it's going to come whether you like it or not. It's not optional anymore. So, and it's been live for so long, this cloud solution. So I hope everyone is up to speed on that one. But it's an interesting change, not the least forcing everyone to do it.
The thing is that all of these details that you and I are reasoning about right now, they weren't really mentioned in the blog post. So these are partly assumption, and also if you are looking at the backlog of features. I mean, I was at a customer before that had about almost 300 features which weren't enabled, which means that, as far as I can interpret the text, is that going on 10.0.21, all of these features will be set to on as default. I haven't had a chance to test it actually, but I think that, I mean, either that or all of these backlog features will be disabled forever, and I don't think that's the case.
No, but the keyword here is on by default. Basically, you're also allowed to switch them off if in case you run into breaking issues.
Yes, at least until they become mandatory.
Yeah, exactly. But then it's up to you to kind of raise if you have any breaking issues with your customizations or ISVs. So again, it kind of drives the communication from your part towards Microsoft, and absolutely drives the testing part. So, but it's interesting to note. I mean, it's a blog post. I mean, there's no. Well, maybe the emails are coming out, but it's important to note these things to plan ahead.
Yep, absolutely.
Cool.
All right. So, what's your first thing?
Yeah, I have like a wide scale of small and large things. I'm gonna jump straight into the supply one, the scale and edge units. I think I bring this up in every podcast because I'm really interested in the scale units and then the structure. You also delivered a very nice session this week on the microservices-oriented architecture that Microsoft seems to be driving towards. This is really warehousing. It's the cloud and edge scale units. Johan, I know you know this, but what's the difference between a cloud scale unit and an edge scale unit? The supply chain management has the cloud scale unit where you can off-put like specific workloads. You can set a specific warehouse operation to operate on this cloud scale unit, mainly out of latency regional purposes. So you have a warehouse in US and a warehouse in Europe. You might want to consider using a cloud scale unit, whereas an edge scale unit is located on-prem to support offline scenarios 24/7, etc. So in the commerce area, you have the retail store scale unit and the cloud scale units. It's kind of similar scenarios where one is put on-prem and to support more. Well, in the commerce part, it's not really offline. It's more like handle poor connections, but it's the same principle. And the new thing here is the edge scale unit and the hybrid setup that it can become quite complicated here when you look at these more advanced setups of warehouses. But it's clear again that this is a area where each release you see a lot of functionality coming into these scale units. So if you're running just one warehouse, but then you don't have these kind of demands, then maybe not necessary for you. But I think the cloud scale unit will be in the same essence as it is for commerce. I think it will be a key part of any warehouse setup, even if you run it locally and you run it, or if you run it in just one region. So read up on the cloud and edge scale units and see if they are for you.
Yeah. So if you're familiar with how retail worked in 2012, this is basically exactly the same thing. But instead of having to install 6 different components and 25 different certificates, you actually have it in one unit now.
Yeah.
So, and the difference is that either you put it in the cloud in your region or you put it on-prem, and that's the difference. And also what you also do is that you buy yourself the option to have maintenance windows without disrupting
exactly
the business, the warehouse or the retail business. So you can actually if you have 24/7 warehouses and retail stores, you can actually do maintenance while they are still up and running, although with some limitations, but they are mostly working.
Exactly.
All right, so my next one, and this one is sort of just a nerdy pet one of mine. I am very fond of Visual Studio Code. I think it's a brilliant product. I usually call myself a developer wannabe. I am not a developer. I would like to be one because they are sort of my idols. So I've been dabbling a bit with Visual Studio Code, and I think it's a really cool tool. But what I'm going to what the news is actually that if you are developing extensions for commerce cloud scale unit, you can actually do it in Visual Studio Code. So you're not required to use the regular Visual Studio one before. Because just a reminder, these are regular .NET code. This is not X++ code. So you're not required to be on a X++ Dynamics DevBox.
Exactly.
You can do it in a regular tool.
It's very cool, and it's clear which path they're going towards as well, and really catching up to the larger .NET area, which has been way ahead of our poor X++ developers for quite some time. But hopefully one day we'll get there.
There is actually a plugin for Visual Studio Code for X++.
Yeah.
So you can actually syntax highlight X++ code in Visual Studio Code, which is cool. You can't compile it. You can write it, but you can't test it, and you can't compile it, but you can write it.
But it's cool, right?
Yeah, it's cool. That's the whole point.
Yeah, but another topic there, I'm not sure if it was this release or the last release, but it's also clear. I mean, the retail SDK is no longer being published in LCS. It's on GitHub instead. So, I mean, it's quite clear trying to streamline the development, release schedules, and not schedules, but release patterns, basically. And
and I mean there have been rumors for quite a while that we will be able to host even the X++ projects in Git. So it is absolutely coming. We are joining the rest of the developer community.
Yeah, exactly. And that makes sense not only from a technical perspective, it makes sense because it kind of widens the area of Dynamics developers or technical people who can work with the product, because it's really hard to recruit or to stay on top, and also to be interested in and actually drive the platform forward if you're way different from what everyone else is doing, right? And it's also cheaper, of course, to have a wider area of knowledge in your staff. A little segue over to, I looked at the platform update for this release, and not that many major changes, but it's clear that the UI team has been very busy. So a lot of widgets and JS movements. I'm not going to go into that. It's not my area of expertise, but I noticed two small things I just wanted to highlight, because I think it's nice that these things are also being worked at all the time. The color picker control is being replaced with the Fluent color picker control to align the experience with other Microsoft products. So when you choose your color, like for your forms or whatever, or for your color, you get the same color picker that you get in other products. It's a small thing, but it's quite nice. I think you make it align the experience. And the same is the hierarchy viewer control. They modified it, and this is a quote, especially for 400% zoom scenarios. And it's a nice thing. Someone noted an error here because it didn't work optimally if you had a very large organization and you had to zoom in 400%. And you log a ticket and it goes all through the hoops and someone fixes it. It's very nice, I think.
Yep. I just have a question related to this. So Microsoft is all about developers being able to choose their platform. Visual Studio Code is available for basically any platform. You can run it on Linux, on Mac, and everyone. They are very language agnostic. You can basically use whatever language you want. When will we see core ERP customization in something other than X++?
Yeah, that's a good question. But it's coming there as well, I think. I mean, it depends on how you define core ERP in the postings or not in Power Platform, etc. Because you could argue that the whole Power Platform is in essence a way to either avoid customization or extend the product without using X++ modifications, right?
Yeah, but what I'm talking about here is native customizations within Dynamics 365 for finance and operations. I mean, what I'm thinking about here is that basically it boils down to binaries eventually anyway.
Yes.
So theoretically, you could, if you have known APIs and known surfaces between the components, you could actually build it in whatever you want.
Absolutely, and I think that's not impossible. That's the way it's going. I think that was maybe sometimes the intent when purchasing AX, but AX was AX, and AX is a quite large product with a lot of lines of code. So maybe the plan was to do that with 2012, like the MS release. But it's a hard thing to do to replace. But you're right, with the new move to, of course, cloud platform, and also using the architecture with, as you say, you expose interfaces instead of exposing the actual code. You make that thing a lot easier. So absolutely, I think that's coming. And again, with the same argument I had just recently with becomes harder to sustain knowledge in like X++ if you can do it in .NET or C#.
Yep.
So to widen the area of recruitment, perhaps, might make sense.
Yep.
All right. So those were two smaller ones. Do you want to take the next one, Johan?
Yeah, sure. And this one was actually the one that disappointed me a bit. Because I read the following: geodetection and redirection for e-commerce site. We're talking redundancy. No, we're not. So what this is basically not redundancy. What it is the option to actually have different site setups for different regions. You know, when you go to Amazon.com, but you go there from Sweden, you are automatically redirected to Amazon.se, for instance, and you get the Swedish translation automatically, and you get the Swedish assortment and so on. And this is basically the same thing. You want to be able to customize a site for a specific region, and maybe even customize the assortment and all of those things.
Yeah, exactly. The funny thing is, I had the exact same reaction when I read that when I prepared for this pod. So I mean, that just means that you and I are both tech nerds, unfortunately.
Yep. But I actually had a thought around this. I know that you and I have been discussing the commerce engine and especially in relation to their competitors. That we are saying that this is probably a good component for ERP users that are using Dynamics 365 for finance and operations. But if you want the best of breed system, there are a lot more advanced e-commerce sites available that you can use and so on. But what I'm actually thinking here is that there are a lot of aspects to what makes an e-commerce site great. Functionality is one, but scalability is another, and that is something that is really, really important. And that's actually where I think that Microsoft, probably just by sort of clicking two click boxes somewhere, would be able to. I'm of course being a bit funny here, but just, I mean, if they were to release 10.0.25 and say, so all of your commerce sites are now worldwide. Yeah. They are automatically redundant over all Azure regions in the entire world. That would be really cool. Even though you don't get any other functionality, that would be really cool.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the power of Azure, and that's the power of course, AWS as well. I mean, all of those cloud platforms have that geo-replication functionality, and as you say, it's not unimaginable that they use maybe not version 25, but that functionality will come. And then it's always, and I think that's a Microsoft scale units are used all throughout the Azure DevOps topology as well throughout the world. So scale unit in itself is a key component in any kind of global rollout. And boiling back to your session as well as the discussion we had with microservices, if you have a worldwide operation, or even doesn't have to be worldwide, just Europe-wide, still makes sense to kind of, you need to worry about latency and using scale units as well as for redundancy, as you say. So I think it's a very good point. It's coming to that. But at the same time, going back to that commerce discussion, I mean, Microsoft retail and commerce has always been a little bit ahead in time when it comes to design, when it comes to like POS and retail channels. And then, of course, there are larger e-commerce platforms like Intershop, etc., for volume. But the more features coming in this in their e-commerce solution that we have right now, it makes it more and more of an interesting candidate for a lot of B2B, also B2C, of course, scenarios. And it's clear that all of these features that are standard in all of the other e-commerce larger platform solutions, like this geo-replication or geo-selection function, it's still a nice feature to have, and it makes it easier to kind of, we don't have 1 million customers per day on our e-com. We have maybe 1,000. Maybe you don't need to invest in that large external e-commerce platform. It's fully sufficient with the one that's included in Dynamics Commerce. So I think it's nice to see that they're investing time into it. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, cool. What's next on your list?
Next on my list is I was looking into finance, and it was a really small list of functionality, something related to cost. Not that much, really. I think that it's coming more in the waves. But I wanted to highlight another topic, because if you look at, as we do for each podcast here, we go through the what's new and changed. The sites, the division into supply, finance, and commerce makes it a little harder, but still, sometimes it doesn't come that much from a feature perspective, but specifically for finance, and especially for finance, I was going to say, is the regulatory updates, because that's where you really see a lot of changes coming, because all of the tax governments, etc., worldwide, they are really ramping up the electronic reporting. It's clear to say some countries are more ahead, some countries are more behind, but it's coming, and it's clear that no one got together in a room and kind of, okay, guys, this is what we're going to do. We're going to follow this standard. Everyone uses different. And even with the standards that they have, like SEPA, still France goes like, we're not going to use the following, we're going to use this. And even within banks, you have specific SEPA formats. So there are no standards. I think you said this is a good standard. What's your saying, Johan, when it comes to standards?
Standards are good. Let's get our own.
Exactly. And that's really it. But with the cloud platform and with Dynamics, one sales pitch is like, yeah, we promise that we are going to comply with regulatory demands. And that's a really nice sales pitch, because you don't have to, everyone is reading it as you don't have to build your own customizations to cover it. And that's not really true, because the regulatory updates will cover the legal demands. So, I mean, for instance, tax reporting, if the Swedish tax government comes with a new format, Sweet Tax or whatever, Microsoft will most likely deliver some kind of electronic reporting format for it, if enough people complain or take us to it. Otherwise, it might be late. But it's still on you to kind of configure it, set it up. You have to build an integration for it. So even if we cover the legal demands, it's not enough to just trust that it will be there. You need to also stay on top of the regulatory updates coming, because if you know of a regulatory update and it's not supported, you better inform or contact Microsoft about it to raise it and really bring it up. So don't just read the features and don't just read what's new and coming. That's what I'm saying. Also have a look at the regulatory updates for your country or countries.
Yeah, but on the other hand, even though every country and every authority in every country uses their own standard, that's the one of the sides of the issue. The other side is that every customer needs to implement every standard. In this case, if we actually have Microsoft to implement every standard, at least we cut down on some of the work.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean that. So it's still a win if Microsoft can say that we have this, and also we've been discussing this before, that some of these things that doesn't just work out of the box is actually in some cases related to the fact that we didn't take these things into account when we set up the system to begin with. So we might have different dimensions set up. We might have different account structures that doesn't exactly match that. But on the other hand, if we know the requirements on dimensions and account structures for Norway, for instance, in order to get tax reporting to work out of the box, then when we set up a new customer in Norway, we will take that into account, because then it makes it a lot easier.
Absolutely. It gets you a long way along the road to implement. It's much easier. You don't have to build everything from scratch. So it's a good thing. The point I'm raising is more, it's not plug and play. It never is.
No. It never is. But if Microsoft takes most of the hit and the customers need to take a little bit of the hit, that's still better than everyone building their own, which has been up until now. So,
absolutely.
Yes. All right. So the next one is actually a bug. No, it's not a bug. It's actually, if you ask Microsoft, it's a feature. If you ask the customer, it's actually a bug.
It's an undocumented feature.
Exactly. So in this case, it actually has to do with sales orders. And the point is that Microsoft has put in a hard limit on manually posting sales orders, and they have set it to 100. And the customer I was discussing this with said that, no, this is impossible. We can't really use this because 100 is too few. Okay, so why are you posting them manually? Because we want control. We want to verify them. We want to control them. So you are actually controlling more than 100 sales orders before you post them. Almost all of them. Okay, so basically none of them. Okay, so why are you posting them manually? We have always posted them manually. So I would argue, and I know that there are a lot of people which disagree with me, but I would argue that if you're manually posting 100 sales order at a time or more, you're probably doing it wrong. Because you should probably have some kind of an automation in this case.
Of course.
But it's good to know if you have a process which depends on the fact that you are posting things manually, you probably need to do it in batches. Exactly. In this case, batches lesser than 100.
Makes sense. Yeah, and again, I mean, all those manual processes should be looked at anyway, but it's a good point to raise, and it makes sense to kind of try to limit it for performance reasons as well.
Yeah, it is for performance reasons. It's a big performance hit. So
yeah, of course, it's the same as the limit in Excel download, right? You can't download too many lines using the Excel entity framework. So, and it makes sense. I have a last one, and it goes back to commerce, my favorite topic, and it's on availability, product availability. And it's hard to really say what the feature is here, more than it tries to provide more accurate availability. Commerce, as you know, as many pool systems connected to ERP are, is a separate application really. So it has channel DB, commerce, scale units, etc. So at any given point during operative hours where the stores are open, if you go into Dynamics backend HQ, you will not get the real-time stock on hand for this channel or for the store because of, well, natural reasons. If you make a sale, it takes as long as it takes for the P job to run, post it, calculate, everything like that. So HQ is not the real time, the place to look at real time on hand. There are other solutions for that. I think you have a topic on that one as well, Johan. But what the new feature in version 22 is an improved or availability calculation on channel side, where you can go to APIs and check, okay, we had this on hand based on the transactions that are coming after within this time frame. We should have this. So it's a more near real-time calculation of on-hand or availability, which can be implemented to either with channels need to look up the availability in other channels, near region channels, etc. You can use that feature if you have the need to have more accurate on-hand for specific operations than just looking at HQ and like nightly batches and reconciliation, all those MRP jobs, etc. Those you can rely on the actual transaction postings. So it's an improved product availability calculation, you could say, that's coming. And it's feature based, so you need to turn it on and you need to configure it and you need to know how to use it and call the API. So if that sounds interesting, make sure to read up on the commerce docs.
Yep, I just shortly wanted to mention inventory visibility because we have discussed this before. Which, just to remind you, it's an API that you can use that is hosted in one of these fancy microservices that are outside of Dynamics. Makes it easier for third-party systems and outside systems to actually query inventory after as you said, the P job has run. We can actually, instead of having to build things towards the retail API, we can actually just use a web service and ask for it, which makes it easier. But one of the features of the inventory visibility integration is that you can actually not just read things from it, you can actually write things through it. So you can actually reserve inventory for orders through this interface. But in order to do that, you actually need to enable the feature inventory visibility integration with reservation of set. Yeah. So if you don't do that, you're not allowed to write things back into Dynamics. But if you do that, you can reserve things through inventory visibility as well.
That's very nice, and I think that kind of that can be a lengthy discussion on how to handle on hand in complex commerce situations with varying pools, topology, etc. It's always complex, and everyone wants on real time on hand. On the other hand, you have IT saying it's impossible because we have different systems. But the visibility app is really nice in that regard because it can gather data from different sources, right? And that's nice to kind of get a daily on-hand lookup. But if you can also implement reservations to cover your planning needs in backend HQ, I think that's a really interesting way to go. And I really like that inventory visibility app, and to see how it goes with that one. I have nothing else actually today.
No, I'm also done actually. So I think we're done for today. Thanks for listening, and hope you'll be back on 10.0.23 with this coming soon.
Thank you.
Have a nice time until next time. Bye bye.
Bye bye.